This class is brought to you by the M.A.G Network and is part of our monthly education series. To find out about upcoming online and in-person events, subscribe and like our YouTube channel, or join our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/groups/M.A.G Network. If you have comments or suggestions for possible upcoming classes, email them to mag.network@outlook.com.
Hello, and welcome to the M.A.G Network. We're happy to have Chris Palmer from Palmer Brothers Bee Farm in Kentucky with us. Chris is a master beekeeper, breeds his own queens, and teaches classes across the state. Today, Chris will be talking with us about the Beekeepers Calendar, a year in the life of a beekeeper. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the M.A.G Network. I'm Indy Guy, and tonight we got a good friend of ours who's been to multiple events and put up with a lot of questions and stuff from me over the last couple of years. We got Mr. Chris Palmer with Palmer Brothers Bee Farm over in Cynthiana, and he's going to give us talk to us a little bit about introduction to bees, and then basically what they do and what he has to do over basically a calendar year, give you an idea of what you can expect. Chris, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing all right, Jose, and how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Appreciate you taking some time out to come and talk with us tonight and stuff.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. It's always a blessing to be able to get the information about honeybees and their importance out. So I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, again, we really appreciate it. So without further ado, Chris, take it away. Educate us and share your wealth of knowledge, sir.
All right. As Indy said, my name's Chris Palmer. I am run a small little beekeeping business in Cynthiana, Kentucky, at Palmer Brothers Bee Farms, along with my brother Jason. And I'm also one of the branch managers for Dadant & Sons Beekeeping Supply Company. And I've been here since December and absolutely love it. Bees are one of my passions, as many people around know, and I like to be able to educate folks on bees, because a lot of times I think we misunderstand the importance of bees. 1/3 of what we eat is affected by pollinators, not just honeybees, but pollinators, and of course bees being one of the most well-known pollinators that we have. So tonight what I wanted to do is just give you a little overview of the importance of honeybees and what they do in the hive, their the cast in a colony, and what they do. So what I'm going to start out with is the buzz on bees, and I'm going to share my screen right there. I think that's the one. That's the one right there. All right. Yeah. I think that's all we need to do now. Wait a minute. Let's get it up there. Okay. This is a buzz on bees. It's an introductory to honeybees and their colonies. And I'm going to that'll work like right there. This was produced by the University of Florida, the University of Florida Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory. It's one of the bigger bee labs that we have in the United States, and they do a lot of research. I'm currently enrolled in their master beekeeping program, and this is one of the presentations that they gave us to kind of help get the word out about honeybees. And we thank you so much for attending the presentation, and we're gonna just move on. You have to bear with me because I have to figure out how to make this. There it is. That's what I'm looking at. There's what we need. The topics that we're going to discuss tonight will be answering the question, what happens inside a honeybee colony? The learning objectives for this presentation are following this lesson. You should be able to identify the types of bees found in a honeybee colony, recognize the stages of honeybee development, and indicate the resources that honeybees collect from their environment. Bees in the hive. There are 3 types of bees found in honeybee colony with unique functions, anatomy, and development. And I'm just kind of showing you this. Here's the worker. And then, of course, you have the queen. And then you have the drone or the male bee. These 2 casts are female. And, of course, this one is male. First one we're going to talk about is the queen. And she is generally there is one queen in a honeybee colony, although there can be 2 for a short period of time. And like her name suggests, the queen is not really ruling the colony. She's making decisions for the colony as a whole. Rather, the queen is the mother of the colony. At the beginning of her life, the queen will leave the nest to mate with the male bees from other hives, and from then on, she'll spend every day of her life laying eggs. A healthy queen can lay about 200 or 2,000 eggs per day. And as you can see, there's a big difference in when they have her highlighted here. There's a big difference in the way that they are shaped. And this, when you go to look for a queen, the one thing that you focus on is her abdomen. In order for her to produce and store this many eggs, the queen's abdomen is very long. In addition to laying eggs, the queen is very important for the colony. She produces unique pheromones or chemical signals which help maintain order in the colony. The queen pheromone also prevents the other bees in the hive from laying eggs. While other bees in the colony may only live for weeks or months, the queen can live for many years. Now we're going to talk about the workers, the other female caste. The second type of female bee found in the colony are the worker bees. Workers are the smallest but most numerous type of bee in the hive. They have, with a healthy honeybee colony containing tens of thousands of workers. As their name implies, worker bees do most of the work in the hive. A worker bee will not have one job her whole life, nor will she jump around from task to task. Rather, honeybee colonies divide up necessary hive tasks based on the worker's age. Young worker bees complete in-hive tasks, while the oldest bees complete the out-of-hive tasks, such as gathering nectar, pollen, and what have you. The younger ones will do house cleaning, work in the nursery, and things like that. If I can get that just right. The in-hive tasks include the building of wax combs that make up the hive. These combs are made of hundreds of hexagonal cells, which are used for food storage and in the rearing of new bees. Worker bees produce wax from glands on the underside of their abdomens. The very first job of every worker bee in the hive is to clean cells that have recently been emptied. So when that worker emerges from that cell, as you can see, these wax cappings in the pictures, she'll chew her way out. And once she's out, she turns around and she cleans that cell that she come out of. As they age, they will switch to processing food resources in the hive. And at about so many days old, they become nurse bees, taking care and feeding the young developing bees. As workers continue to age, they will start to leave the hive for the first time. Some worker bees, called guard bees, will actually stand guard at the hive entrance, attempting to keep out the nest intruders like bees from other hives, potential pests, and predators like skunks and yellow jackets. When they have reached so many days in age, workers will start to fly around their hive, orient themselves to its location on the landscape. Finally, the oldest worker bees in a hive will become foragers, traveling up to many miles from the hive to collect food and other important resources for the colony. We'll talk more about many of these tasks later in the presentation as we explore what's inside of a honeybee colony. I like this picture because you can actually see the mandibles on the bees. You don't think that they can bite or chew, but they can. This is the one thing everybody's afraid of, though. Workers of all ages help defend the colony when necessary. They used a barbed, venom-producing stinger. While a worker sting is a very effective defense mechanism for the colony, a decision to sting is a decision to sacrifice her life for the good of the colony. Because when a worker stings, her barbed stinger gets stuck in the skin of her victim, ultimately killing the worker in the process. For this reason, in most cases, honeybees do not want to sting you. They only do so when they feel that their home is being threatened. If you take a pretty close look at that picture, you can see the little barbs on the side of the stinger. Okay. And now we're going to talk about the males, or the drones, as we in the beekeeping industry call them. In addition to the two female castes of bees, there's also male bees in a honeybee colony. Male honeybees are called drones. At some times of the year, a colony may contain hundreds of drones, while during the winter, no drones will be present in the hive at all. Drones are large, fuzzy bees with rounded bodies, compared to the pointed abdomen of the queens and the workers. Drones have very large eyes that wrap around the side of their heads and do not have stingers. So they cannot sting. Drones have such large eyes so that they can better see the queen bees during their mating flights. They actually mate in flight. Remember that we talked about how a queen will leave her hive at the beginning of it? Well, no, we did not talk about that. But that's what a queen does once she emerges and comes out. She goes out to a male congregation area, and that's where all the drones are at. I said a drone congregation area, and she will mate with as many as 20 to 30 drones, 15 to 30. It just depends. And then she'll fly back to the mother colony. So on these mating flights, drone bees from other nearby colonies will gather together in the area, what is called a drone congregation area. There, thousands of drones from many different colonies will wait for the queens to show up. To be successful, a queen must mate with 15 or more drones on her mating flight. Although many drones do not achieve their lifelong goal of mating with the queen, those that are successful never make it back to the hive, as they die immediately after mating. Outside of the reproduction, drones contribute nothing to the maintenance of the colony. They need to be fed by the workers for much of their lives, and they are evicted from the hive before winter when the colony is trying to conserve its resources. To summarize, the bees in the hive, we have two female castes, the queen, who lays the eggs, and the workers, who do everything else. And then we have the male bees, the drones, whose purpose is to mate with the queens from the other colonies. Now we know about the bees in the hive and what they do, but how does a worker become a worker, or a queen become a queen? To answer those questions, in this next section, we're going to look at the development of the honeybee. Honeybees, like butterflies, undergo complete metamorphosis, going through the 4 developmental stages: egg, larva, pupa, and then adult. In the beekeeping world, the first 3 stages of egg, larva, and pupa are collectively known as the brood. Honeybees start their lives as an egg, which are white in color and shaped like tiny grains of rice. The queen bee will lay 1 egg at the back of each brood cell. Each egg will stand upright in its cell for about 3 days, after when it will fall over onto its side. And then each egg that a queen lays can either be fertilized or unfertilized. The fertilized eggs are female and can become either a worker or a new queen. Unfertilized eggs are males and would become drones. And so the queen is the one who decides whether she's going to have a fertilized or an unfertilized egg, which I think is pretty amazing. After the egg falls over, the egg will hatch or eclose, as it is called in the insect world. Larvae will look pearly white. They will look like grubs, and they sit in a C shape at the back of the brood cells. They start out very tiny, but over many days, they grow to fill the entire cell. So this is just a progression of the development of the larvae. During this time, the worker bees that we talked about earlier, called nurse bees, will continuously feed each larva individually. We were talking about young bees and taking care of brood in the nursery. Henceforth, they call them nurse bees. Over its 5 to 7 days of development, each larvae will be fed over 100 times over the course of at least 1,000 visits by their worker sisters. Larvae are fed a protein-rich substance called brood food, which worker bees produce from the glands on their heads. After the larvae have grown to fill their cells, worker bees will cap over the top of those cells with a mixture of wax and other hive materials. Beekeepers refer to the developing bees in capped cells as capped brood. Under the cappings, the larvae stand up on its end in a part of the larval stage known as prepupae. From this point on, the developing bees will receive no more food until they emerge into the hive as adults. Under the cappings, the prepupae become pupa. The prepupae become pupa, and they spin cocoons around their cells, similar to a butterfly developing into chrysalis. Finally, the developing pupa beneath its capping starts to resemble a bee, forming a head and legs and eyes. Eventually, it starts to develop color, with its eyes first turning a red color, and then they turn purple. At the end of the pupal stage, the whole body takes on the color and starts to harden. Finally, at the adult stage, the newly developed adult bee will chew its way through its cell capping and emerge out into the hive. Freshly emerged bees cannot sting or fly because their stinger and wings have not fully developed yet. And these are the days of development from egg to adult bee. So it's all the way across the board. It takes 3 days for each one of the eggs to hatch, 3.5 to 4 days. It'll hatch. And then these are the time length on the second row of the time that they spend as a pupae. 5.5 days for a queen, 6 days for a worker, and 6.5 days for a drone. And then as a pupa, these are the days that they spend in that transition. 7.5 days for a queen, 12 days for a worker, and 14.5 days for a drone. And as you can see, the time evolution is quite different. For a queen, it's only 16 days. It's 21 days for a worker, and a whopping 24 days for a drone. The shape and the size of the cells that the bees develop in also differs between the queens, drones, and the workers. Worker-sized cells make up the majority of the combs in every honeybee hive. And the workers are the ones in the middle, of course, and this is what their cappings would look like, or their cells. Drone cells look similar to worker cells, but they are larger in diameter. Furthermore, when the developing drones are capped in and going into the pupal stage, their cappings are domed outward to accommodate the larger size of the male bee. And these are the drones. You see how the cappings aren't, these are nearly flat, and these right here are kind of dome shaped, or bullet shaped is another word to use. The cells in which the queen bee develops look much different from the worker and drone cells. They are very large, have a rough, wavy texture, and are oriented vertically on the face of the other combs with the cell opening pointing downwards. So they are actually, they'll come off the comb like this, you know, from here, and they kind of just hang down in front of the other comb. The fully developed queen cell looks very similar to a peanut shell in both shape and the texture. At all stages of brood, egg, larva, pupa, and adult are generally present in the colony at the same time as the queen continuously lays new eggs. The workers continuously feed the larvae, and the new bees continuously emerge as adults to replace the bees that have died. You think about that. So if a queen is laying 2,000 eggs a day, at some point, there's 2,000 bees that die that have to be replaced. Have resources. In order to fuel this constant production of new bees, the colonies must also be constantly gathering and processing important resources collected from the environment by worker bees. We talked about that at the beginning, that those older adult worker bees leave the hive to collect resources. There are 4 main items that honeybees need to collect from the environment. Pollen is the protein source for the whole colony, making it important for developing bees. Forager bees are perfectly adapted to collecting pollen from the anthers of flowering plants. When a honeybee lands on a flower, pollen gets stuck in the branched hairs that cover nearly her whole body. And once she has gathered a lot of pollen in her hair, she will comb it into her pollen baskets, which those are small divots on the bee's hind legs. Foragers can pack a lot of protein, or can pack a lot of pollen into these baskets, reducing return trips to the hive. And when you look actually inside of a colony and you look inside those cells, you can see where they've packed that pollen in there. When the forager returns to the hive with a full pollen load, she enters the hive in search of an empty cell in which to deposit the pollen. She pushes pollen pellets off of her hind legs into a cell. And an in-hive bee then comes along and pack that pollen in the back of the cell, making more room for more pollen pellets to be added. In-hive bees will also mix some nectar in with that pollen when the cell is full. They will top it off with a small drop of honey. This mixture, called bee bread, will ferment slightly and can be stored in the hive for up to a few months. Pollen and bee bread are primarily consumed by very young adult workers who are responsible for feeding the developing larvae, also known as the nurse bees. Flowering plants not only provide the colony with protein-rich pollen, but they also provide them with nectar. Nectar is a liquid, sugary substance that plants produce to attract pollinators. Foragers collect nectar from the flowers using their proboscis, which is a straw-like tongue that can suck up the nectar from the base of the flowers. The bees temporarily store the nectar in an internal organ called the crop. Once her crop is full, the forager will return to the hive. There, the forager will regurgitate her stored nectar, offloading it to an in-hive worker at the hive entrance. So she doesn't actually take it all the way back up to the cell like she did the pollen. She just regurgitates it to a worker there at the entrance. The receiving bee will deposit the nectar into an available cell. Now the worker bees need to work to dehydrate the nectar so that it can become honey. They can pull moisture out of the nectar by blowing bubbles in it and fanning their wings over the nectar cells. Once the nectar has reached a moisture content of around 18.5, it has become honey. Worker bees can cap it over with a thin layer of pure beeswax. The honey can be stored in this way in a hive indefinitely. The bees will consume these honey stores throughout the year for energy. They store it up into the hive to feed on through winter and other times when flowers are not available. Honeybees actually get most of their hydration needs met through the consumption of nectar and honey. However, pure water is still important to the functioning of a honeybee colony. The most essential use for water in the hive is for thermoregulation. When temperature causes the colony to get too hot, worker bees will place small droplets of water throughout the hive, and then they will fan their wings, moving air around the hive. This movement of air causes the water to evaporate, cooling the hive in the process. It's kind of the same thing as going to some of these thrill parks, and they have the fans blowing with the water spraying out to keep you cool. The final item that forager bees regularly collect from the environment is sap or resin from the trees and other plants. Among beekeepers, this sticky substance is called propolis. Propolis is used throughout the hive to seal up small cracks and crevices, in addition to making the hives more weatherproof. Propolis has important but poorly understood antimicrobial properties that are thought to contribute to the colony's overall immunity, and thus helping to keep the colony healthy. To summarize, forager bees, the oldest worker bees in the colony, collect pollen, nectar, water, and trees sap from the environment. These are 4 resources that are essential to the health and the success of the colony, but they also have benefits outside of the hive. And we all know this one, honey. Humans, of course, also eat honey. It is the job of the beekeeper to make sure that the honey harvested from a hive is a surplus resource, not honey that the bees are relying on for winter. Pollen. Although the honeybees collect pollen as a food source while foraging, they also inadvertently move grains of pollen between flowers. This results in the pollination and ultimate fertilization of plants. Pollinating by honeybees and other pollinators is important to both agricultural and natural ecosystems, and that is definitely a topic for another day. This presentation is produced and distributed by the UFIFAS Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory. You can access this presentation and learn more about the work that the lab does by visiting www.ufhoneybee.com or by scanning the QR code using smartphone or camera. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and at this time, I'll take any questions we have over that one before we get to the next one. Does anybody have any questions about honeybees? The problem is I have a slow window.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Will your next section talk about like what person needs to get started in honeybees, equipment and stuff like that?
Well, yes, I can talk about that. I sure can.
Okay, I was just curious because that's something that me and Allie's been thinking about. Probably not this year, but we are looking at. I think that would be a good plus to our homestead and stuff. So
sure. Well, one thing I will say, it is very expensive. However, that investment is always there. I am trying to figure out how to. There's what I was looking for. Now we're talking. I think I can slide that in there. There we go. So this is a presentation that I use, and I go around and I've used this in the schools rather often to teach elementary students about the different things that we do, but I think it's always a good resource. One thing that in beekeeping, we're always looking ahead. So one thing you said there, Andy, that struck me was you said, we're looking at getting into it and it's probably next year. And at this point, if you're wanting to get into bees, it would probably be a good idea to research, make a decision on what you want to do. Do you want to just make honey? Because there's going to be a surplus of, may not be a surplus of honey, but there could be a surplus of bees. And what are you going to do with them? Are you going to expand? Are you going to make more colonies? I think as many folks can that tell you with bees, it becomes very intriguing and you end up with more bees than what you need or time to work with them. So kind of feel things out. And if you've got a surplus of bees, you know, maybe in the homestead community, you can, somebody else wants to get bees, well, they can come get bees from you. So it's just something to think about and go ahead. As the manager here at Daydant, I oftentimes find myself with people who will walk in and they have a whole list of things that they're going to buy. And they haven't done their research. And me, instead of just pushing a lot of equipment and stuff on them, I ask them to please go research, and I'll come and I'll help them make a plan to actually, you know, so that they're investing that money properly. Because as most beginner beekeepers know, or veteran beekeepers know, they were once beginners and they have invested money in multiple things more than once. And if we'd, you know, taken the time to research and invest our money wisely, we wouldn't be investing so much money. As for example, if you will take the just accept the fact that you're going to get stung and buy you a nice ventilated jacket as opposed to a suit. Now, I'm not saying there's not a place for a suit, but I really just feel like that it's a false sense of security for someone with 2 hives to go get a suit. And if you have bees that mean, well, you need to requeen them because it should be a pleasant experience. So instead of getting a full suit, you get a nice ventilated jacket, which it saves you money and you've invested your money wisely. So be aware that there's a lot of places, Amazon and other companies and this and that have kits. And for beginners, they may be things that you'll never use. And so, you know, the essentials of beekeeping are you need a beehive, you need live bees, you need a veil, something to go over your face, you need a smoker. And I will say that Daydant does make the best smoker on the market. And then you need a hive tool. And with those things, you can keep bees or maintain bee husbandry, I will say. So, and you just, you know, and one thing about beekeeping is that you are always looking about 6 months ahead. And this is why I do this presentation, to kind of give you an insight on what we're doing at that time, but the goals that we're aiming for. Okay. So that being said, this is Beekeepers Calendar. The calendar starts in August, and everybody's a little bit different. This is kind of curtailed to our region, Central Kentucky, around the Lexington area. And it goes August through July. So if we look now and we're in April, I'm already getting my bees ready for winter. I've already made my honey production because we can never count on what the nectar flow is going to be. But I'm looking forward to making sure that my bees are starting into the fall season right now, and that they're strong and able to get through the winter. So in August, and we'll get back around here to May or April, but in August we're doing mite treatments. And that's number one on that list, just for the simple fact, because that's what's plaguing the beekeeping industry in the United States right now. And actually today I was able to, I was going through some hives and I found a couple mites. And what I kind of wanted to do, if I may, and I know this is up here, and we can look at this again here in a little bit. These are varroa mites. Varroa mites in and of themselves aren't detriment to the bee. But you see, I put a small paper clip there, and the two little dots up there are varroa mites. And you can see how small and tiny they are. Even to my finger, they're quite small. But they're kind of like a bee tick. And what they do is they go and they bore a hole into the honeybee, and then they feed on the fat bodies inside the honeybee. And the bees can tolerate that. However, what they cannot tolerate is the viruses that are vectored into them, because once viruses are vectored into the bees, then the bees vector the viruses to other bees, and so on and so on and so forth. And some of them are pretty detrimental. But when the mite actually comes off, it actually leaves a hole in the exoskeleton, and the bee, it never heals up, henceforth decreasing the lifespan of the honeybee. So one concept that you need to take on if you're wanting to get the honeybees is you're not just managing the honeybee colony, but you're managing the mite populations as well, trying to keep them down. You're also at this time, because we're just hopefully worst case scenario coming out of a dearth in August and starting into our fall flow. You have hive beetles, which are a secondary pest, and we apply traps for those. There's no traps for the mites, but we do have different treatments. And just so you know, if you're trying to keep bees naturally with natural products, there are some ways of doing that. There's a couple, well, there's more than two, some natural products that have been formulated that are pretty well combat the mites. And I won't say that you can't go treatment free, but what I will say is you can't go treatment free and management free, because if you're going treatment free, there are management practices that you need to maintain in order to keep those mite populations down. At this time in August, we're evaluating queens and we're requeening the hives. We're combining small colonies. And one thing, a concept is you can't mix bees. Well, you can. I do it all the time, and I've never seen any problems with them. You're going to feed your colonies. We actually do feed honeybees in order to ensure that they have plenty of stores to get through the winter. I use that time to stimulate them to draw out foundation or draw the combs out that's on the frames. And it's just about time at that moment to wrap up any queen rearing operations that you have, and getting the last few queens out if you're propagating queens. And at this time, because I mean, hopefully you have everything painted and ready for winter, exchanging out the old wore out woodenware that you have out in the field and putting some newly fresh painted, not new woodenware, but newly fresh painted woodenware out there to get through the winter. In the photo that you see over there is we're finishing up for the day, and as you see, we've kind of gotten to the point where we're feeding bees. There's a big jug there with the sugar water. Over there you see the green tub, and that's one of the thymol treatment, or Apagard, and that's thyme is a natural product. So we utilize that, and as you see there, though, we're kind of at our wits end and ready to hang things up for the day. So in September, we're finishing up our mite treatments, and we're really feeding at this point because we're really trying to get them bulked up for winter. A good, strong, and there are some things you'll have to do to research to understand some of the things that I'm talking about, the terminology. But double deeps. A double deep is two large hive boxes or hive bodies put together, and they sit on one another. And we're trying to get them to fill that up with a lot of stores to get through the winter. Here in Central Kentucky, 60 to 80 pounds is a preferred, and I know that's kind of a large number. You know, that's 20 pound difference. However, some colonies don't take that much and some others do, depending on, sometimes it's the breed of bees that you're maintaining. So we're going to finish up our mated queen introductions. I personally prefer to introduce new queens in the fall. And I do that because in the spring, I want her to be at her prime and at her best. We're going to make sure that all of our hives are prolific and productive. And you want really good numbers of bees for your fall flow, which is coming here in September and in October. Sometimes it hits, just around the end of August as well. At this point, though, we're going to try to apply some pollen supplement. And it's not a substitute. You notice that word, it's not substitute, it's a supplement, just like we supplement any type of livestock that we raise. And what that does is just give them, they're able to raise more brood, because there are three keys to beekeeping, and that's having good queens. We have low mites and the right nutrition. So if I'm feeding them their carbohydrates of sugar water or corn syrup, and I'm feeding their protein pollen supplement, then they're getting everything they need also with what they are gathering up around them. So in October, we're getting towards the cooler months, and where we were feeding maybe a 1 pound of sugar to one pound of water ratio. 1 pound of water is about equal to 1 pint. We start ramping that up, because in cooler weather, it's harder for them to dehydrate that honey. As we talked about earlier, they have to dehumidify that nectar in order to be able for it to be shelf stable or at 18.5%. So what we do in order for them to bulk up in pounds is we raise the sugar ratio up. And so we're putting 2 pounds of sugar to one pound or 1 pint of water. And that helps them to bulk up, and they don't have to work as hard. And so at that point, we have 60 to 70 pounds of, we're wanting to try to get them up to 60. I said 60 to 80, 60 to 70 pounds of stores. We move surplus honey stores to weaker colonies. So maybe we have some that'll have 100 pounds of stores. Well, maybe we have some that have 50, so we can move those things around. We try to equalize the hives to make everybody the same, so it's easier for us to see if we have a reduction in bees and be able to maybe fix that problem before we get into winter. Install your last queens and ensure they're laying. And it's getting pretty critical in October that things are about to shut down, so you have to be pretty vigilant. Install entrance reducers. Some folks like to make the entrances smaller. So as your colonies reduce, because they don't have as much natural food and things around, they reduce in numbers. And so as they reduce in numbers, and some bees just like to rob other bees, other colonies. That's the easy way. So you put entrance reducers, which makes the hole smaller, therefore that they can defend off the colony. And winterize the hives once cold weather approaches. And there are many different ways that people winterize hives, and it's a hot topic. Me personally, I don't do anything. My winterization is make sure they have plenty of stores to get through the winter, and close them up and just check on them. In November, we start doing oxalic acid treatments in our operation, and oxalic acid is also another natural product where we're taking and essentially vaporizing, and it's not vaporizing, I forget the word at this moment, but oxalic acid is only good for phoretic mites, or the little mites that we had right here. Those are the mites that are on the bees. Now, for every mite that you see, when I saw these mites, I opened up a cell, and there were 4 mites that come out of that cell. So it's, you can say, so for every mite that you see, there are at least 4 more in a cell somewhere, 3 to 4 more. So the oxalic acid kills the phoretic mites, or the mites that are on the bees, right? And so we're trying to knock those down. Well, as we get into where they don't have as much to eat, your bee populations come down, but your mite populations are staying essentially right there equal. So we try to kill the mites off so that they can't reproduce. off of the bees, therefore trying to get them cleaned up because that brood nest is shrinking as well. And so we're just trying to get ahead of that mite population. You put mouse guards in, and that's just because bees are trying to keep that cluster in that box. They're trying to keep it at 93 to 96 degrees. And so if you're a nice little country mouse and you're looking for a nice warm place to spend the winter, a beehive is nice. So a lot of folks will put mouse guards on. You're going to continue feeding as long as weather allows. And this is a point where you start to make preparations to repair your equipment that you've used throughout the year. And I'll go back and reference some of these pictures of things that one might need to get started. In December, beekeeping's not over in December. In fact, this is actually when, for me, is when it's really getting started. Because I've closed up shop, I've extracted all my honey, and now I'm ready to do the fun woodworking and what have you. So in December, you're going to prepare and repair your equipment for the next season, paint things up. As you can see in this picture, I spent the time to paint all that stuff. And one thing that I found out is one lesson to be learned is you don't buy cheap paint. I mean, that's your investment. You're protecting your investment. And it's just like insurance. Insurance is expensive. And so, but we do that so that we keep our investments, we have insured our investments, and that's one thing that the paint does. So a good primer and a good paint goes a long ways. Plus, you don't have to work as hard painting. So you're going to make up new frames and boxes, paint, preparing your orders of packages, nukes, and queens. Now, if you'll remember, I said to Indy, it's great that you're starting to plan ahead right now. They start taking bee orders for package bees, which is normally the standard is 3 pounds of bees and a mated queen. Nucleus colonies, which is nothing more than a small box of bees consisting of 5 frames. And also, if you're going to be requeening and get mated queens in, you'll make these orders. So start preparing in December, because a lot of those either open up the last of December or the very first of January. Stock up on equipment. Plan 6 months ahead. So if you're planning to do splits and make more bees in your bee yards, if you can't do it unless you have the equipment. But if you're making that effort to have your equipment long before and get it painted up and ready, it's nice when you can walk to your little storage building and pull out a bottom board and everything that you need and go go get those bees. So it's time to render your wax down, make hive products, briefly inspect hives on warm days, and measure cluster size. You're going to look at honey stores, and one way you look at honey stores is just by the lift method and feeling how heavy they are. It's okay to look inside, and they normally say 60 degrees. You're going to observe for cleansing fights. A good strong colony will have bees that want to go out and use the restroom or use the bathroom and what have you, make cleansing flights, because they may have been cooped up in there for quite some time if we had cold weather. Start planning for new sites for your bee yards. And it's a good time to move hives during the cooler temperatures because the bees won't come out. But you have to be careful because some of them will. In January, and all these pictures are pictures of that I've taken of our bees over the last few years. January, you're going to order your queens, packages, and nukes as early as possible to ensure early delivery. As you'll notice, a lot of this stuff is repetitious because I'm reiterating this is the time to do it. So you were preparing in December, and now you're going to do it. So continue your repairs and your assemblies, order your new equipment. At the end of the month, brood rearing begins. And so the bees, as we start to get a few warmer days in January, the bees will start to move around. The queens will start laying a little bit because they're just trying to get a head start. And they did a real good job of that this year. You're going to check those stores. You can add sugar bricks or granulated sugar if necessary. You can't add liquid at this time of the year, but you can sure add solid sugar. Watch for cleansing flights, and when it snows is a really great time. If it gets up above, 35, 40 degrees sometimes and the sun's shining, the bees will fly while the snow is on, and you can see little droplets and stuff. You always want to try to remove the ice from entrances so that they're, so the bees can get out if they need to. In February, you're going to open up your hives on warm days. Right there, that is a February hive, and you look and you can see all kinds of dead bees out behind that in that picture. But that is a common cluster of bees in February. And you notice snow's on the ground, and I'm looking at it. Now, I'm not pulling frames out. I'm just taking a look and checking them out. And the one thing to understand is bees are not actually heating that entire box. They're working to heat the cluster, keep that cluster at that temperature of 93, 96 as close as they can. Continue to evaluate stores. You finish up your season repairs because it's getting ready to break loose. Oxalic acid treatments are becoming a great thing a tool to use. Prepare your queen rearing equipment, mating nukes. At the latter part of the month, watch for maple pollen on warmer days. We actually had that happen this year as well. Feed sugar bricks or mountain camp sugar. Warm weeks, you can begin to start with a little bit of syrup sparingly. And I would you pick different feeders, as you know, to accommodate the season. Small amounts of pollen supplement. You can start doing that depending on, if you're trying to rear the brood nest up. As I said, as long as they have the resources, you can stimulate them to do it. And I use feeding as a stimulant more than anything. And I have fed very sparingly this year, and thank goodness so. March. I kind of like this slide because it is the season. This is when everything really gets going, because go and you can get your queens, nukes, and occasionally you can get some early packages, but seldom. It's a little bit early. And one thing to know about packaged bees, they most often they come from down south, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, because they can propagate bees earlier. And so this is when we start feeding 1-to-1, 1 pound to 1 water syrup to stimulate colony growth, and apply our pollen supplements, make splits into large colonies to start new colonies. And I'm just now getting that done, so I'm way behind the ball. That was supposed to be back in March. Make up newts for queen rearing. We're making new queens. Begin your queen rearing. It's kind of tough to do that because of the temperatures. You have to have enough males to mate with your females and what have you. And it normally is, for Central Kentucky, it's in April. Check your stores, because this is when most colonies collapse in Central Kentucky, and you got to feed according to the weather. That's one big thing I will note on there, is you have got to check their stores. March is the time when most people lose their colonies. You can also at that time treat with Fumidil if you think that you have nosema, and it's pretty much just dysentery in the bee. And I just simplifying that, it's a lot more complicated than just dysentery, but it kind of gives you a guide to look at. In that picture, if I can go back, I don't know how to go back. Yeah, there we go. That picture, we had went down to Georgia and bought some brooded queens, and there were 5 little queens in here, and that is the mother of almost all of our stock now, and I absolutely love those bees. They're Carnolian, Caucasian, Italian cross. They're mutts is what they are. So in April, that's your honey time. So now we're getting into that. We've seen some nectar flows coming along sparingly, but they're coming along right now, and have been since the end of March. And this is when you add your honey supers. And a lot of veteran beekeepers will caution me to do that or say this. I watch for the redbud trees. When the redbud trees around here bloom, I'm putting my honey supers on, because I feel like the honeysuckle's next, and then it all just comes in all at one time almost. You want to feed your weaker colonies, That's what this picture is showing, is a little small colony, but evidently they're small. This is a 5-frame nuke in the picture, and I have fed it. But I have watched those things take down like a half gallon in 24 hours. They can really suck down some syrup. You're going to evaluate your queen proficiency. If she's not doing very well, laying to her capacity, it's time to get you a queen and requeen that hive. Swarm management. This is one big thing that I want to drive home. If you're going to try to we talked about this last night in our meeting. That being a responsible beekeeper means that you have a swarm management practice. Because if my bees swarm out and Indy is my neighbor, and the bees go over to Indy's house, find a crevice, and take up residence. Now, we don't know if they were my bees, but we suspect that it is. Then that's my responsibility. So if you're keeping bees, you need to manage them. And more often than not, if you're doing the right thing, you're going to have a surplus of bees. And so you swarm management. Me personally, I would much rather take the time to make my own swarm of bees as opposed to let them swarm and then I have to go catch them. But it is a great time to go catch rogue swarms. But as I said, you don't want to catch your own. And you can also set out swarm traps, and they're a really great resource for catching swarms. And it's becoming quite an item to have. So in May, we have a continuation of April. Your queen's in full production. There's more supers. You're catching swarms. You're adding more supers. Here in central Kentucky, the black locust blooms normally the middle of May, but I'm forecasting it's going to be earlier this time. And you're adding more supers. And swarm management, expecting every 7 days, 5 to 7 days, making more nukes, continue rearing queens. Everything's starting to bloom, and you guess it, add more supers. That frame right there is a great frame of brood. I mean, that's just a lot of cat brood. Where we talked about in workers, that's all worker brood that you see on that frame. And these are things that we look for when we're going into our colonies. June, slow down or not. It could be, and maybe not. You may need some more supers. This is probably the biggest swarm I ever caught. I estimated it to be about 9 pounds of bees. It was phenomenal. It was great. It was great to watch. I don't want to work that hard no more. So swarm management, inspect your hives as the nectar flow begins to diminish, make splits for your sustainability. To be a sustainable beekeeping operation, that means you always have some bees on standby in case you need a queen. Rear your own little queens on a small scale so that way you don't have to buy them. You're making your honey harvest coming in June. You begin making preparations to feed as the dearth begins to set in towards the end of June. Luckily, last year, I think it was about middle of July before it set in. Perform mite assessments and order mite treatments. As the dearth becomes prominent, hive inspections need to happen every 10 to 14 days to ensure that they're not running out of something to eat. Queens continue to lay, provide syrup and pollen supplement. I put substitute there, and I need to change that to sustain the brood nest. Make certain apiaries, make certain that the apiaries around, they have a water source, because as we talked about them earlier, they're using water to thermoregulate the hives. They need water. So if there's not a water source, provide one. A 5-gallon bucket with some polystyrene in the top works really well. You're still getting swarm calls in June. And if you remember, we started in August and now we're back to July. This is when we do our honey harvest. Is normally in July. You harvest the supers and extract honey. Swarm management, inspect hives as the nectar flow begins to diminish. Make splits for your sustainability, feed as the dearth sets in, and perform mite assessments. As the dearth becomes prominent, hive inspections every 10 to 14 days. Queens continue to lay, provide syrup and pollen supplement. I need to change that again to sustain the brood nest. I'm trying to keep them strong, and in July, I'm trying to make them draw out brand spanking new comb for the next year. And I'm doing that, stimulating them by feeding. Make certain apiaries have a water source. that's really, really important. And queen rearing for fall requeening is a great time to do that in July. And then it says take a vacation because you've earned it, because you have a very short time before August hits and you got to start all over. So this goes through this is just a extra. We don't need to go through that. So that pretty much sums up that presentation of the beekeeper calendar. And if you're not acquainted with beekeeping, you begin to understand that beekeeping is constant. It never stops. And you're always doing something, always. As I said, for a beginner beekeeper, you don't need, I mean, you can be meager. I always say people, tell people start out meager. So some of the things you need, you need a smoker. Smoke is good for you because it's really your only defense to get away if you need to, because sometimes you run into some mean bees and they change their temperament quite often through the year, if depending on what they're eating. You need that. You need a hive tool, and we may find one. You need a veil, and you need bees and a colony. There's really not much. As you can see, this queen here, I just want to talk about these pictures. She's marked. She has a blue dot, and that doesn't tell me exactly what year it is because I can't never remember. I know what this year it's red. Last year was yellow. That's why I keep these pins. I was working bees today, and we mark them different colors. Of course, these are hives. As you can tell, the color really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the bees. I now I think transitioning where all mine are going to be white. I do love the diversity of the colors. However, I like to find one good paint and stay with it. And you see where I was working that winter to fix things, and as you can see, these other boxes are showing a little wear and tear. Queens, I'm just looking to see if you have any tools. No, I don't see any tools around. That's the end result, which that's not easy either, processing honey. A lot of people think it might be, but trying to find time to process honey and keep bees, you stay pretty busy. I don't know if there's anything else I can add, Indy. What else can I talk about for people beginning with what they're going to need?
What is there any like online courses, or I know there's a lot of is there like a website that you can find local beekeeping clubs, societies? I mean, where would they start? What's a good starting point?
A great start is to find I don't know how to stop sharing my screen. Oh, here we go. Let's stop there. There we go. One of the ways of getting into beekeeping and making great decisions is to be around other beekeepers. And so there are local associations throughout the state of Kentucky and other states that are a really great resource. We have one ourselves on Facebook, the Licking Valley Honeybee Society, and anyone is welcome to join up to that. And we can get you in touch with someone who's local in your area. So their Kentucky State Beekeepers Association is a good resource. You get in touch with them and email. No matter where you're located, they could get you the resource that you need. You can contact me here at DATAC, Frankfort Branch, and I will get you the resources you need, because it's very important for you to have someone or some folks to mentor you, help you make the right decisions. I think that's really essential so that you're not just dumping a lot of money at one time and you're making wise decisions, because you can really invest a lot of money. So I say, reach out to your local people, and there's always somebody willing to help.
I think you touched on something very important, mentorship, because throughout your presentation, you was talking about, sustainability, keeping it growing, doing your splits, catching swarms and stuff. And I think, especially for me, like I said, it's something we're thinking about. I definitely am going to have to find someone's shirt tails, because I understood, but I didn't understand, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
And to have that person or group of people that you can reach out to, hey, what does this mean? Or, hey, this is doing this, what do I do, type deal.
I really do try to, yes. Chris Foxworth says, contact your local extension office. They are a good resource, and that is correct. Thank you, Chris. I really try to simplify things. It's very difficult to do because it's a specialized industry, and it's not a subject that most people are accustomed to. But what I try to do is paint a picture is that it is animal husbandry. It is not take bees, put them out, they make honey, you take honey, and then we wait till next year. That used to be the case back before the 80s come along. You could do that, but it's not that way anymore. And one fact that people talk about, well, bees are regional and this and that and the other, so these bees won't do good here and this and that. Well, I'm going to be honest. Bees were introduced here in the 1500s. They are not native to, the honeybee is not native to North America, to the United States. They were brought here from Europe. So therefore, I don't agree with that. I think when they're, the bees acclimate to where they're at and do the best they can. Now, I'm not saying that there's not some regional genetics that help them survive, but bees tend to adapt no matter where they're at pretty doggone well. So, but I just, it's a job. It really is. And a couple hives will produce a copious amounts of honey for a small family, or, a large family. And sometimes I found that managing 2 colonies in a very efficient and good manner, you can get more honey than you can out of 10, because you're focusing on those 2 colonies. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions? Feel free to unmute your mic and ask away. I'm sure Chris would be happy to share any knowledge he has with you. Chris, how can people reach out to you if they do have questions? I know Chris Foxworth had mentioned reaching out to your county extension office, but could they reach out to you?
They sure can. You can always go to dateant.com and find out the local, my branch is the Frankfurt branch, and I don't mind you at all calling here. The number would be supplied online at dateant.com. You just got to look out for the contact the Frankfurt, Kentucky branch. And I'm just going to also give the number 888-932-3268. Now, mind you, it's a place of business. You may not get through. But however, you can also reach out to me at Palmer Brothers Bee Farm. You spell that all out, Palmer Brothers Bee Farm at yahoo.com. Email me. I'm happy to respond. Another way, Facebook, the Licking Valley Honeybee Society. You can go on there. We have, I'm instrumental in on their chat, not instrumental. I'm active on their chat when you see questions and what have you. So I will get back with you. I'm not real fast sometimes, just because I've got a lot of irons in the fire, but I will get back with you. So, and that's the thing about beekeeping. We have to be a resource for folks if we want to see it succeed. So, and bees are really important to us. Really important. They have bees, pollinators, all of them in general, but honeybees, one thing that we can manage. So.
Hey, Chris, this is Jeff Rice.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, could you go over kind of the mechanics of the turning that oxalic acid into a gas and how you put it in the hive?
Absolutely. So there are multiple types of tools that they use. I'm going to talk about mine because that's what I'm most versed with. It sublimates. That was the word I was trying to think of. You sublimate that oxalic acid. So the oxalic acid comes in crystals, and you think about their large crystals. And what it does, you introduce that to about, I think it's 440, 450 degrees. There's kind of like a little tolerance area there. And when it heats up that, what it does is kind of turns into, we like to say it's a vapor, but it's really not. It's just sublimating those larger crystals into smaller crystals, kind of in a powder form. And as it gets hot and it does that, it creates pressure in these oxalic acid guns, if you will. They're kind of like a gun, and all it is a heating bowl with a heating band on it, and it's covered up. It's sealed, and when that oxalic acid gets to that temperature, then it's ejected out a nozzle into the hive, and then the bees, of course, know it's a foreign to their hive, and so they fan to try to get it out, but you have the hive sealed up too. And what they essentially do is just fan it all the way through the whole colony, which covers the bees. On contact, it kills the phoretic mites, and so then the mites die, and they actually release and fall off from the bees, and that way you knock the mite levels down. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, that answers that part. And then how do you, say you have your hives in a remote location, how do you power this vaporizer?
So you either take a 110 generator with you, or they're also powered their 12-volt batteries.
Oh, okay.
There is a new product which is really taking hold, where they are making these oxalic acid guns that are powered by your power tool batteries. And those things are phenomenal. They're rather expensive. Most anything in beekeeping, because it's a specialized industry, is expensive. But you can really get through a lot of colonies with these new devices that are coming out. And that's one of the things that is, folks don't really home in on the oxalic acid, because was a long, monotonous process, but we're becoming more efficient at it, and we're finding we're using oxalic acid, which is something that is found in honey. It's actually in the honey. Traces of it are in the honey, and so it's not a bad product. And actually, they have just about all but not. They've approved it that we can utilize oxalic acid, one type, 8-by-oxal, while we have honey supers on. So hopefully that's a helpful. It's quite expensive for rural, very rural locations. Or I mean, it's a big investment, and but at least they've come up with a way. Any way you go, it's a big investment, but at least if you have to, be able to treat where there's not any electric or anything like that in rural areas, you're able to do it. But it all costs about the same to get a good, great, efficient application device.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, is there any large event, conference in the state of Kentucky, local regional events that people could check out to make some contacts, see some of this different types of equipment, take some classes? I mean, does your retail place there, do they offer classes? I mean, where can they reach out, other than, I know we've talked about the extension offices too, but
Sure. I know the Kentucky State Beekeepers Association normally puts a calendar of events that come up, so that's always a great resource. There are quite a few little festivals and things around that I know. Clarkson has a festival. It's in September. And Clarkson, Kentucky was where Walter T. Kelly, one of the bigger companies that began, he was very instrumental in bee the bee industry, and educating folks. And he started the business down there. It grew very, very big. In fact, one of the other big manufacturers and bee equipment retailers, Man Lake, bought that out. And so that's a great resource down there in Clarkson, Kentucky. Also, but they have a big festival down there, celebrating the honeybee and this and that and the other. The Licking Valley Honeybee Society did their first Cynthiana Honey Festival in Cynthiana, Kentucky last year, the end of September. And we done a lot of handshaking and teaching folks about bees, trying to get, celebrate the honeybee and get people involved. There is a Tennessee, probably one of the, I'm just going to say nearly the biggest, if not the biggest in North America, is the Hive Life Conference. Cayman Reynolds, he's a YouTube sensation in the beekeeping industry, has put that together. It's in Sevierville, Tennessee. It's the first weekend of January, and it is everything honeybee. It's a big conference hall of vendors and this and that and the other. And anybody who's interested in just really getting to know honeybees and the people associated with the bee industry, that's a great resource to be a part of and to go down and check out. There are other organizations. There's the what are they all called? If I'm not a member of them, I don't know, but I know, like American Beekeeping Federation. They have conferences. There's Heartland Heartland, Western, and Eastern. Western Apicultural Society, the Heartland Apiculture Society, and then the EAS, and Eastern Apicultural Society. And they have conferences during the year as well. And they're, you've got one on the West Coast and in the Heartland, and then on the East Coast. So there's a lot of beekeeping organizations around. YouTube is also a great resource, I'll say as well. The one thing that I'll caution you is that you always look for vetted information. I'm not saying that somebody that keeps bees in North Carolina can't help you in Arizona, because the fundamentals are still the same, but they are also management is a regional thing. So you have to just be aware. But make sure that the information that you're taking from someone is vetted information. It's proven, and more often than not, the folks who give proven and vetted information, it is their livelihood. So, and beekeepers are, really do like to share what they do because they want everyone to be successful. So, but those are some resources I can say. You can also check out your extension labs or extension colleges. Kentucky State University is University of Florida down there. Some of the bigger colleges, they have extension programs, and that's a great resource. They can get you in touch with folks. And there's grants for beekeeping that like land management grants that that are associated with those entities. And so you can always, there's always resources around. You just sometimes have to do a little research. So
great information. Anyone else have any questions? Again, feel free to unmute and ask away. I do want to mention that Hive Life conference that you mentioned in Sevierville. I follow them on Facebook, and I mean, it is a big event. There's people literally comes from all over the world for that. What is it, like 3 or 4 days, something like that event?
It's Thursday through Saturday.
Yeah,
Thursday evening through Saturday evening, and it is big.
Yeah, it's big, and like I said, I've seen people from literally all over the world fly in just for it. So, if you're in Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, that might be worth your drive definitely next year. So something to think about.
People come from all over.
There are
Sure
also
do.
uh, um, um, workshops that they do at the Hive Life Conference to instruct and teach people, um, not just the the vendors.
Something else, yeah, you're absolutely right, Chris. Something else I'll mention is a lot of the states have they actually have a state apiariist, someone who is oversees the beekeeping industry, if you will. So you always check to see if you have a state office. I mean, in many states, bees are regulated; they have to be registered. Um, the state of Florida is that way. I don't know of all the states that are that way, but I'm pretty certain California is that way as well. But that's always a good resource as well. Is check your state government and see if there's a resource there. Uh, you can do so much online, I guess now. Um, I know the Kentucky State Beekeepers Association, they have online courses. Many of the colleges around have online courses that you can take if and those folks also become a resource as well to find equipment and this and that and the other. So, but
Great
I'm
information.
always here ready to help if anybody needs anything. And if you're, no matter where you're at, we have 10 different branches. We can always get you to a branch closer than I. So all you got to do is give me a call or check us out online, daydamp.com.
Awesome. And I'll echo what Chris said. I know I bug him over the last probably 2 years. I've bugged him all time of day or night, and I usually get a reply back from him. You can also check him out at his store there in Frankfurt. Excuse me. But he'll also be at the Heartland Homesteading Conference that we sponsor over in Campbellsville, Kentucky. He'll be there as of right now, the 3 days, September 29th through October 1st. Large homesteading conference. He'll be there with his awesome honey, as well as sharing his knowledge. And I always see after his class, he has people coming up to him and just like asking questions, because he brings stuff. He does demos. He has bees with him. Usually he does really good in person and stuff. So you definitely need to check him out.
Well, thank you for that. I try. I think, education is everything. The more you know, the better decisions you make. And, maybe beekeeping is not for you and because it's not something you want to go at haphazardly. So, and I enjoy doing classes, and I have a wonderful time every time that I'm associated with those conferences, Indy. I really do, and enjoy the people around, and they're always so giving and just hospitable. And I always have a good time and get great questions. So
I am going to pick on Chris about this. At our last event at Heartland last year, so I try to help host these events. So Chris was there as one of our guest speakers, but guess who got invited to try a steak cooked over a campfire? Not me. I'm just saying.
I did, and it was right enjoyable too. That was nice. That was
But he
nice.
was right.
I smiled all the way home.
I bet you did. We do have good people, and I mean, they are fun. We do cookouts. Everybody chips in. We, play music. We have a good time, and we're there to learn. And it's a great family-friendly event. So
It really is.
Hopefully, some of y'all can make it to that as well. Chris, thank you so much for staying over tonight. I know you're an hour ahead of me, so it's 8:30. It's getting close to my bedtime.
Yeah. I've got an hour and a half waiting for
That's right.
the package bees
you got
to
a
come
delivery
in,
tonight. I forgot about that. So,
or 2.5 hours, I should say.
But
Yeah.
Seriously, we thank you for coming on tonight, sharing your information with us. Chris, thank you very much, and I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it as well.
We hope you found this class beneficial and that it gives you some good information on things to consider before getting into beekeeping. We are working on more great learning and fellowship opportunities, so be sure to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. or join one of our Facebook groups or our Instagram page to keep up with the latest information. Again, I want to thank Chris from Palmer Brothers Bee Farm in Kentucky for opening up his hive to us and sharing some great information. On behalf of the MAG Network, be safe and have the knowledge.